And I was reflecting on that, and a lot of things that he said, they were not, those are the things that I had heard before, but the way he said it made a significant impact, and I don't know why, but I think it has something to do with the fact that the thing that he said, he genuinely believed, and it came from his heart. So I was touched by some of the things he said, and I was at a party yesterday where this is what I was talking about, the wealth, culture, children's spirituality challenge of how to motivate the next generation and stuff. And I don't know what he's going to talk about today, but I'm looking forward to hearing that. And thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Ren. Thank you for this introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to you all. His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj, His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu, Nirakula Devidasi, the Honorable Thai global members, industry leaders from the Silicon Valley, industry leaders from the hospitality industry, professionals from the IT industry, Stanford University alumni, distinguished guests. Thank you all for being here this morning. My name is Rajesh Talwar and I serve as the president of the Artha Forum. Artha Forum is an online community that actually connects spirited entrepreneurs to come together, pool in their resources, help society. Basically, we bring to you the relevance of ancient wisdom, modern business. That is the whole idea, basically, today. I have with me here my colleague Rajiv. Rajiv, please stand up. Just Rajiv and Sanjeev. A very brief mention I would like to make about. Now, Rajiv, Sanjeev, and Kushal. Kushal is a managing director of a power group of industries. Three of them, about 20 years ago, they got together and they formed a very small venture called Apar Infotech. Within a year, this venture ran into losses of $4 million. And they were thinking they would shut down. And Radhanath Swami happened to come there in Pittsburgh, and they were driving down from the hills of West Virginia, and Maharaj wanted to use the restroom. So Rajiv said, Maharaj, why don't we go up to my office? It's just around the block. So they went up. And then they saw, Maharaj came out, he went to each of those rooms. And he said, so this is your office? I said, yes, Maharaj, we're just trying to. And there was turmoil inside because he wanted to break the news that I'm going to shut down. So Maharaj went through all the rooms and he said, Rajiv, I bless you and I bless your enterprise. And then there was no looking back. Seriously. There was no looking back, because then one thing led to another. A fledgling small infotech company then was, in Warburg Pincus invested in them. They went, they really increased in size, and finally Rajiv sold it for a very hefty sum. The thing is, the beauty of that is they had incorporated charity at the core of the business. And I'm going to touch upon this a little bit more. But before I even begin, I want to introduce His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu and Nirakula Mataji. Vaisheshika Prabhu is the president of ISKCON San Jose. They have a brand new temple coming up now at Mountain View. The grand opening is actually next month on 6th and 7th. I would request you to all go there. He's a very dynamic person. He has the Stanford Bhakti Yoga Club and many other nice programs going around. I would request you to spend some time with him after the program is over. He's a very interesting person. We also have here with us Shamsundar Prabhu. Is Shamsundar Prabhu here? Yeah. Shamsundar Prabhu is one of the earliest disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is the founder Acharya of ISKCON, which is popularly known as the Hare Krishna movement. In fact, Shamsundar Prabhu is credited with introducing Krishna consciousness to the Beatles group. Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, George Harrison, all of them. In fact, George Harrison remained a lifelong friend. Just before George Harrison passed away, Shyam Prabhu was the only person who actually met him. They remained lifelong friends. He's put up a very beautiful film on Journey Home, which is the journey of Maharaj. I'll speak a little bit about that as well. And towards the end, we are also going to film it. We're going to show it to you. He's here with his friend Stuart. Is Stuart here? So Stuart and Shyam Prabhu are actually making this film. You might want to talk to them once this is over. And so Artha Forum actually began as a small endeavor. We had a first program in Vada, which is the Govardhan Eco Village. It's about 75 miles northwest of Bombay, where some of the Silicon Valley entrepreneurs attended that program. We have here Ron and Rashmikant and of course Sushant. Where's Sushant? Sorry, Sushant is right here. So they attended that program, Maharaj. It was a 2-day conclave. And after attending, they said, well, Silicon Valley needs this kind of thing. You should come here and do it. And actually that is the reason why we are conducting this particular program here. Of course, this would all have not been possible without the gracious help of Venk Shukla, the president of TIE Global. Venk, we are very thankful to you for facilitating, arranging this. Last month, Rajiv and I, we were in Singapore. We attended the Asia Venture Philanthropy Network, AVPN conference there. Some 340 people turned out from some 32 countries. Basically, it was a impact investment, investment first, sustainable development, and venture philanthropy and all those things. I was amazed to see how so many people are now getting concerned about giving back to society what you've received. So, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to sermonize. I'm not here. That prerogative is of Radhanath Swami Maharaj. Actually, if anything, I feel very humbled. You're all very experienced, right? And even a little nervous. But I feel there must be some background information I need to give that to you before we actually begin. Now, many of us wonder, what is a Swami doing here in TIE Global, right? This was the same question which was asked at the world headquarters of HSBC just in the recent few months ago. Maharaj went to the world headquarters of HSBC in London and addressed about 850 investment bankers. Now, the most brilliant people in HSBC, and they all wanted to know why we invited a Swami. What is he doing here? And then Maharaj spoke to them for a couple of hours. They were mesmerized. They gave him a standing ovation. And ever since that time, Maharaj has been going to HSBC. He's gone but a couple of times there. They want to meet him, and even the chairman emeritus, who's based out of Switzerland, he had a meeting with Radhanath Maharaj. Thing is, consulting spiritual leaders is actually a necessity. It's actually, we have such a heads down focus sometimes. We actually forget. We may be able to cut the woods very swiftly and efficiently, but sometimes, we don't come to know that we're in the wrong jungle. Or climb the ladders and not realize that the ladder's leaning against the wrong wall. So we need guidance. We all need. Let's cross our hearts. Every one of us here will admit that at some point of time or the other, your life goes out of sync. Right? Great kings, chivalrous kings, even Maharaj Yudhishthir, Parikshit Maharaj 5,000 years ago, they consulted rishis, they consulted spiritual leaders, and he was Chakravarti Samrat on the entire planet. And they would consult and find out how should we conduct our lives, how should we live as statesmen, what is there that needs to be done. Actually, from the time statesmen, politicians, kings, they stopped consulting spiritual leaders, they actually lost their valor. They lost their resolve to make things happen in a good way. As leaders, we also need that. See, leadership depends on affection. It is stirring the deep currents in the hearts and minds of people. Leadership means affection. Affection comes from good behavior. Good behavior will come from the quality of relationships that you have. This is very foundational. And to understand that, you need guidance. You need spiritual help. And that is what the topic of today is, the culture of wealth. That's what we're going to actually speak about. As I mentioned to you, philanthropy, social change, impact, investing, sustainable development, but that all remains at a superficial level. What we actually need to understand is why we do what we do. At a molecular level, what is required? And I said I won't summarize, but I must tell you a few axiomatic truths. See, for wealth to grow, it must be shared. It can't grow. And not just that, if you understand clearly, once your basic needs are met, after that, wealth cannot bring more happiness unless it is shared. Once you at least meet all your basic needs, then you have to go out and reach out, give back to society. As they say, that from what you earn, you make a living, but from what you give, you actually make a life. That's really important. So Artha Forum intends to take you deeper on that level. We are so hung up now on personality ethics. Character has taken a back seat, right? So personality is important. How much you can impress, how much you can, talk and give, and sign a deal. Nobody even talks about character. Nobody even talks about how that wealth is sacred, what needs to be done with that particular wealth. That means, as they say, to live, to love, to learn, and to leave a legacy. All four are important. Physical needs, social needs, mental needs, and spiritual needs. All important. If you don't do badly, if you don't do well, even in one of those departments, your life is going to, all your energy is going to go down. You need to do well in all these four departments. To live, to love, to learn, and to leave a legacy. Now, why we are here? We actually need your help. We're not talking of telling you to loosen your purse strings and give us money. No, that's not the intention. What I mean by that is, here's a platform. We'll tell you how we engage. And I'm going to tell Rajiv to speak a little bit how to build charity at the core of your business model. If you want your charity to survive. Then Rajiv, Sanjeev and Kushal met Maharaj the first time when they were just about starting. So he said, Maharaj, do you have some instruction for us? Maharaj said, yes. Do your business without greed and pride. And don't get implicated in sin if you want your wealth to last generations. Very profound, very simple, but he laid the foundation to that whole thing, and which is something they have been actually following all this time. So we have partners, we're a private equity fund, and we have partners, we have IT and IT-enabled service business, right? And many of our co-investors, the condition for our co-investors is that we will invest with you provided you upfront provide some of the upside towards charity. We don't do business unless you also build that. We're not saying, do it for our charities, but some charity that you feel very dear. So we're just starting Everest Basil Hospitality Fund. We have Ron Pitambar here. Ron is a very special person. He is himself a very pious person, very spiritually connected. And he attended our Artha Forum in Bombay, and he was very excited. Then he got talking to us and said, let's do something together. We need people who actually understand why we need to do what we do. So we're all, Sushant and Ron are going to be working with Basil Partners. So I just wanted you to know that. And Rajiv and Sanjeev and I have known Radhanath Swami Maharaj for 30 years, and we've been his disciples, we've been following him. It is an honor for me to introduce Radhanath Swami to you. So Radhanath Swami Maharaj is a spiritual leader and a social reformer. He is a very much sought after motivational speaker. In fact, Maharaj has been called twice to the UK Parliament. He has addressed the House of Lords. One as recently as just a month ago. He has been invited there. He's spoken to some of the ultra high net worth individuals in London at the St. James. In fact, as you know, you probably saw the picture earlier, your President Barack Obama and the Indian ex-President Mrs. Pratibha Patil, they invited Maharaj to exchange some views. And heads of states, heads of nations have been actually calling. Maharaj was at the Microsoft headquarters in Seattle. He is visited practically every major American university. In fact, he's slated to speak at Stanford University tomorrow and at the Google headquarters on Tuesday. We invite you if you like to come. There are some leaflets lying outside, you can, see. Now, before we actually begin, I'd like you to see a small 1-minute snippet about Radhanath Swami, and then we will request Maharaj to speak on the culture of wealth. Some housekeeping announcements. There's a restroom on this side, and lunch is going to be served. So please do not go without having lunch. There's water on both sides in case you need it. And kindly let us have your visiting cards at the entrance there. There is Himanshu, he will be collecting. So we'll just stay in touch, we'll keep you informed about our other programs. Anytime later, you can just leave your visiting cards there. If you don't have your visiting card, maybe just give your name and your email ID. Thank you so much. We just play this thing and then we'll request Radhanath Swami Maharaj to give his lecture. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj with a round of applause. Can we have the lights on, please? You put that column mic?
ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाखाया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Aschadyate Sathadine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I'm very happy and honored to be with all of you today. Special gratitude to the president of our Thai organization, Sushant, for bringing me here, to Rajiv and Sanjeev, and Rajesh for the organization, to Vaisheshikaji, who is one of my dearest friends. I was asked to speak on the subject of the responsibility of wealth. As I was sitting here, my mind went back a couple of years. I was invited to speak at the Michael Milken Global Conference at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. And I was invited to one panel discussion where several of the most powerful leaders in the fields of America and international business were discussing what is real leadership. There was the CEO of Safeway Foods. There was one lady who was the CEO of the largest cancer research organization in the world. There was Steve Wynn, who owns big hotels in Las Vegas and all over the world. There was Joe Torre, who was one of the history's greatest baseball managers. It's quite and I wasn't on the panel, but there was a Swami there listening, so it was quite full of variety. What interested me is at the conclusion of this very, very insightful and sincere exploration of what real leadership is. Mahatma Gandhi was quoted 3 times. That was the culmination. Steve Wynn said that his model of leadership are the words of Gandhi. And he quoted, "There go my people. I have to follow them because I am their leader." And then they put on one of these computer screens a quote by Gandhi, "First they will ignore you, then they will laugh at you, then they will persecute or attack you, and then you will win." And then the culmination was Gandhi's words, "Be the change you want to see in the world." Michael Milken asked Joe Torre, "You are one of the 3 greatest baseball managers in history. Before you came to the New York Yankees, they had not been in a playoff in 11 years. After you came, they were in 9 playoffs and won 4 World Series. And when you came, all the press said it was a great mistake and you were useless. Said, of all that you have accomplished, plus you're in the Hall of Fame for when you played yourself, what do you feel was the greatest accomplishment that you made in your life?" He turned to the lady next to him and said, she helps people with cancer. I've done nothing compared to that. And Milton said, well, there's a lot of Yankee fans out here. There's 3,000 people in this ballroom, and they think you have done something. He said, well, if there's anything that has given me fulfillment and I feel I have actually accomplished in this world, it's not those things. He said, when I was a child living up in New York City, my home was so abusive. I think his father was an alcoholic. He said, I suffered so miserably as a little child. He said, the only relief and release for me is to go out and play baseball. And that's how I became such a great baseball player. Just releasing all the frustration, fear, and pain that was in my heart in catching and throwing those balls. And then I became a manager and won so many World Series. He says, but what really I accomplished is I started an organization in the inner city schools of New York to help children who are suffering from abusive homes. And when I see these children who suffer the way I suffered, and they have some direction, and they actually feel that somebody values and appreciates them and likes them, and I see their smile, that is far greater than all I've done in my professional career. And then he said something that moved me. He said, and this whole organization was not my idea, it was my wife's idea. She's taken the leadership. Now, this is, of course, on a very relative level, but what really brings fulfillment to our life? Anandamayo Vyashat, the Brahma Sutra tells, which means every living being is seeking pleasure. That's the motivating force behind trying to develop power, wealth, influence, and all the very sensual pleasures that may come with it. It's a search for pleasure. The only pleasure there is for the heart is the pleasure of love. To love and to be loved. That is the fundamental need of everyone. The Brahma Sutra also says, Janmadisyayataha, that the origin of everything that exists is Bhagavan, or Krishna, or God. And the origin of that propensity to love is our natural, innate love for God. Because we are not just these bodies, which are like cars. Some people drive Fords, and some people drive Mercedes, and some people drive Ambassadors. But the person driving, he has different needs than the car that he's driving. The car needs gasoline, oil, tune-ups, and we have to do that because that's our vehicle. It serves a purpose. But the person needs food. So this Atma, this living force, this soul that's within us, its greatest need is to be reconnected with its own nature, or with God, through love. When we understand this principle, then we understand the foundation of Vedic wisdom and how it can apply to every aspect of life, even in this modern world. According to the Vedic culture, wealth is sacred. Now, sometimes Swamis don't speak like that. It's Maya, it's illusion, it's all temporary. But in the Bhakti tradition, wealth is sacred. Because wealth is the energy of Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, the feminine energy of love, of the divine, Narayan. When we understand how this sacred energy of wealth is connected with the source, with Krishna or with God, then we can actually realize the sacredness of our wealth. But when we forget that, and we see the wealth in terms of my own selfishness, my own arrogance, my own greed, then that is called Maya, or illusion. It's not that the wealth is an illusion, it's our perception of it that is an illusion. You see, everything in this creation is potentially either good or bad according to the consciousness of the person who's using it. An example, a simple knife. A criminal will take that knife and slash somebody's throat to steal their money for himself. A surgeon will take the same knife and save a person's life. Is the knife good or bad? The knife is as good as or bad as the person's consciousness who is using it. And in the same world, in the same way, everything within this world is potentially sacred, that can uplift all of humanity and all living beings, or could cause great destruction. Technology. Technology can create the most vicious weapons for terrorists. And technology can also spread love of God. Spread compassion all over the world. The same buttons. The same science. Ancient wisdom is the wisdom of how we can change our hearts, individually and collectively, so we can be in this world but not of this world. Are any of you familiar with the Bible? Recently I was at the House of Lords speaking, just last month. And one man, he was a lord, one of the most powerful entrepreneurs of Westminster. And he wanted to speak just a couple minutes about how business, investment, and wealth were very complementary with spirituality. And he gave two historical, biblical references. He said there was a person named Noah. Have you heard of Noah? Noah's Ark? He said there was a person named Noah, and he taught us how to keep our stock afloat even during liquidation. And he said, and there was a man named John the Baptist, and he taught us how we could go down to the River Jordan to make a prophet. The prophet is Jesus. He gave him initiation or baptism. In the Bhagavad Gita, there's a beautiful explanation that my guru, Srila Prabhupada, would call the peace formula. How we can be in this world fully active and dynamic and productive and competitive while not being of this world. Coming from a place of love rather than greed. compassion rather than envy, humility rather than arrogance. This verse from Bhagavad Gita, which he called the peace formula, is from the 5th chapter. Bhoktaram jagatapasam sarva lokamaheshwaram suhridam sarva bhutanam gyatvam shanti richati. That if you want to achieve real peace, real fulfillment, we must understand how Ishvara, the supreme source of everything that exists, or God, who we call Krishna, is the proprietor of everything that exists. And we are trustees. We are caretakers. And that means our own body. This body is God's property. It is to be used in harmony with God's will for the welfare of myself, my family, my society, and all beings. We were discussing the other night, this is not my wife or my husband or my children or my parents. That's not the substance of it. That's there on a relative level. These are God's children that are entrusted in my care, and there is a great responsibility of the example that I set for them. And my wealth. It's God's wealth in my care. You see, in a true sense, proprietorship means control. And what do we really have control over? By the power of time, everything will be taken away from us. Time is so mystical. You can't taste it, you can't see it, you can't touch it. But it's so powerful that time will burn out the sun, will dry up every ocean, will pulverize into fine powder every planet in the universe. And time will take away, on a physical level, everything we have and everyone we have. So what do we really own? Everything is owned by the Absolute, by the Supreme. We are trustees. Yes, we work. And that work is our duty. It is our responsibility. But what comes to us, we can either use it with greed, with lust, with envy, with arrogance. And Gita explains all those qualities, they burn like fire. The more you feed them, the more hungry and hotter the fire burns. Or we could use them with love, with compassion, with humility. And that's this message of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna didn't tell Arjuna, go to the Himalayan caves and meditate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. He said, no, it is your duty. You must fight this battle. But to do it with integrity and compassion. Do it as an expression of the wealth you gain from the discussion that we're having today, rather than the emptiness inside you to try to fill it somehow or other. Dharma doesn't mean to be lazy. It means to be active, dynamic, competitive, with integrity. To earn with integrity, and to spend with compassion. Yes, there will be so much competition, but we have principles of what lines we don't cross in our need to compete with others. Integrity means that we have sacred ideals. And we embrace those sacred ideals. Even if there are temptations wherein we can earn so much if we give them up. Or even if there is fear that I might lose so much if I give them up. But the greatness of a person is to live with that integrity. And it is that integrity that brings true fulfillment. It is that integrity which is the legacy that we could give to our children. I'd like to tell you a very strange story. I wasn't planning on saying it, but I don't really know what I was planning on saying anyway. I was brought up near Chicago. And when I was young, I heard so many stories, because Chicago has a lot of stories. There was someone named Al Capone. You all heard of him? He was a gangster, probably the most famous gangster in American history, yes. He had a lawyer whose name was Easy Eddie. He was such a good lawyer that he could just manipulate the law in so many ways that nobody could touch Al Capone or his leaders. You know, they would kill people and they would exploit people and they would do so many things, bootlegging in those days and prostitution, and they would get him on charges, but they couldn't touch him because he had this Easy Eddie. And Easy Eddie was given so much money. He had his own airplane. He had a house which was practically a property like a city block in downtown Chicago worth massive fortunes. He had boats. He had everything. And he had a son. And his son could go anywhere, could have anything he wanted, anytime. But Easy Eddie was thinking, there's one thing I have not given my son. An example of integrity. He has everything material that he could ever want, but he doesn't have a father that he could actually in his heart be proud of. And he came to the realization, the only way I could give him an example that he could be proud of, I have to testify against these people who I have been supporting and who are causing so much harm to others. And he did. And you know if he did, he knew if he did, it was just a matter of time till he would be shot dead. And many of these prominent gangsters went to prison on the basis of his testimonies. And one day when he was driving his car, another car drove by with machine guns and dozens of bullets in his body, and in an alleyway of Chicago, he laid on the street dead. He paid a heavy price because he wanted to give his son something that was greater than money and airplanes and cars and clothes and jewels. A legacy of integrity. I'll tell you another story. There was a person named Butch. He was also from Chicago. And he was in the United States Air Force in World War II. And he was in the Pacific on one of those aircraft destroyers fighting against the Japanese Army, Navy, and Air Force. And a squadron or a whole group of airplanes flew off to go somewhere on a mission. And he happened to see that whoever was taking care of the planes didn't put enough fuel in his engine. So he had to leave all the other airplanes that were going somewhere and turn back all alone. And on his way back, he saw something that horrified him. He saw a whole group of Japanese planes that were coming to bomb the ship where there were thousands and thousands of his sailors. And the ship didn't know they were coming. Nobody knew they were coming. And he didn't have any way to contact anyone. So what he did is he flew into about 15 fighter jets. He flew right into them and was shooting at them. 1 against 15, and they were shooting back, and he was shooting back, and they were shooting back, and he shot down several of them. And then he ran out of ammunition, and he started flying into them and knocking off their wings. And finally, these 15 fighter jets of the Japanese Air Force, they thought, this man's totally crazy, he's insane. And they all flew away. And his plane was very, very much beaten down, and he landed on his jet, and everybody saw what was happening. He was given the first Congressional Medal of Honor in the United States Air Force in World War II. Because he had this higher principle. The higher principle, he was willing to give up his own life for the sake of the cause of all those other people on that ship. The most interesting part of these two stories is this person's name was Butch O'Hare. O'Hare Airport in Chicago was named after him. And he happened to be the son of Easy Eddie. His father taught him that. Not just by words, but by example. We have a responsibility to ourselves, to God, to the world, and to each other. When people trust us, our family, our friends, our employees, and the public, that trust is what gives us real credibility. It is that trust alone that brings people to actually make a commitment to the cause that we're representing. The Mafatlal family, at one time they were extremely powerful in India. And then so many things changed with government policies, and there was fighting among the family members and everything else. So they were not on such a level anymore. But recently, one of our dear friends, who happens to be the uncle of Rajiv's wife, a great example for him, Rishikesh Mafatlal, their company went through a very, very difficult challenge where they were going through something like bankruptcy, some sort of reorganization where they had to sell off massive assets. But in the process, in India, when you have tens and thousands of workers, you can't just send them home. You'll get put in jail for that. You have to compensate for them. There was so much pressure. He was losing massive amounts of money every day. He couldn't close it. He couldn't keep it open. There were all kinds of legal issues. There were all kinds of permission issues. It took years. And he had to really scale down things. And most of the leadership in his company, they were happy to work for practically nothing, even though they were being offered huge salaries in various parts of the world, because they believed so much in the integrity of the company. And together they brought it up to a very stable and successful level. And he's humble. He said, I could only do it because these people trusted me so much. Last year I spoke at the Ford Motor Company. Now, my father was an Edsel dealer, and he went in total bankruptcy. That's a kind of Ford. So our family's not so inclined toward the Ford Motor Company. That's a long story, which could be another class, actually. When I went there, there was 3 directors of international departments for the Ford Motor Company. And I asked them, how long have you worked here? They both said all 3 of them said they were working for Ford for over 30 years. And all 3 of them said their parents, their fathers, worked for Ford for 40 years before they retired. And their grandfathers worked for Ford for 40 years before they retired. And their great-grandfathers did the same. You see, it's not a matter of how much money they get only. Somehow or other, they have a real commitment. Because through it all, they've developed a certain type of trust. The greatest wealth we can gain in this world is not just how much we have. And then when we die, people just say, oh, so what? Because, I'm a Swami. I haven't had a bank account since 1969 or signed a check since then. And I think it was about $8 or something like that. But I see things and I travel the world. And when you have a lot, people may speak respectfully to you. But in their hearts, oftentimes, they envy you. And envy is a type of hatred. They really would like to see you fall, even though they're treating you very nicely. And relationships based on those things are quite superficial, even if there is some affection. But people love you for your integrity. People love you because they trust your character. To gain the trust of our family, to gain the trust of our society and of the world, of our employees, whatever, due to our integrity, that is wealth. That is a rich person. When Arvind Moffatlal passed away earlier this year or last year, there were thousands of people I saw who were really, really crying because they loved him. He was the Humanitarian of the Year according to the International Lions Club some years ago. And it was based on his love and devotion to Ram, his beloved Lord. This is the great need of this world, but how? How to live with integrity when there are so many temptations and fears and so many reasons to compromise? For that, we require a strong foundation. A beautiful building. Yes, just day before yesterday we were at Shashant and Namrata's house. It's a beautiful home, nice furniture and nice architecture. But how many people have come to your home and said, you have a fantastic foundation underneath it? Anyone ever say that? Nobody really talks about the foundation. But the fact is, if your foundation's weak, if a storm comes, everything you build upon it will crumble and fall. It is the foundation that sustains whatever we have done. In this world, a place of dualities, honor, dishonor, success, failure, pleasure, pain, happiness, distress, victory, defeat, they're always changing, like the changing of seasons. There's winter, spring, summer, fall. In India we have monsoons, a fifth season. There will be storms in our life, and there will also be sunny days in our life. How do we resist becoming arrogant and condescending toward others during the sunny days of our great achievements? And how do we resist becoming envious and falling to immorality and temptation and fear when the storms of great trials and tribulations come before us? It becomes natural if we have an inner foundation of spiritual character. The Bible tells like this: if you build your house on shifting sand, when the storm comes, it will crumble. If you build your house on solid rock, no storm can knock it down. The storms are there. And what is that foundation? That foundation is the integrity of our character that is built on inner fulfillment. I'm going to tell a story because Shashant and Namrita asked me to tell this story. I hope it fits in with what I'm saying. I'm going to try to connect it. We're talking about this need for inner fulfillment. My mother and father, when I went to India in 1970, I really broke their hearts. It's written about in this book, The Journey Home, and my friends Stuart Sender and Shyam Sundar, they're making a documentary about this book, if you'd like to speak to them. But I told them I was going to Europe with my friend Gary for a summer vacation between college semesters, and I'll be back for my next semester in college. That was 2.5 months later. 2.5 months passed. They heard nothing from me. I was 19 years old, the middle son. My older brother's son is here now, Willie. And 3 months passed. They heard nothing from me. And I was hitchhiking because I didn't have any money. So they had no way of communicating with me. By God's grace, there were no cell phones in those days. By God's grace, there was no internet in those days. I just had all facility to disappear. Now, 4 months passed. They heard nothing from me. The college semester already started and I wasn't there. Now, as mothers and fathers, many of you, what would be going through your heart? Finally, 4.5 months later, they got an aerogram, the cheapest possible postage letter. And it said, that I have been seriously considering life. I have seen the world through the window of a Western man's eyes. For 19 years, I thought I was really old in those days. I was about to be 20. My parents thought I was a baby, but I thought I was an old wise man. I said, now I want to see the world through the windows of the eyes of the people of the East. I am hitchhiking to India. And I said, and Gary's no longer with me. He went to Israel. So here they get this letter that now I'm all alone. And I'm hitchhiking to India without any money. And they had no way to contact me to say, please come home. That letter that they receive was postmarked Iran. So they knew I was not turning back. And ultimately I came to India and went to the Himalayas and became a sadhu and traveled around with a little begging pot and was going to many rishis and sages and lamas and babas, traveling, trying to find God, trying to find that spiritual foundation in my life. And I don't recommend anybody to do what I did, but it was my calling and I did it. You could learn all the same things in your bedroom if you just have a little more intelligence than me. But I traveled, especially if you visit Vaisheshika Prabhu's temple. But I traveled, and eventually I came to Vrindavan, the holy place of Krishna, where I met my guru, Srila Prabhupada. And his compassion, his wisdom, and how he represented such an ancient tradition in such a practical way deeply moved me. And I dedicated my life to trying to assist him in this way. You see, he didn't teach a sectarian concept. He taught that the essence of all spiritual processes, of all religion, the very essence of human life, is to see everyone with an equal vision. And the only way we could do that is if we awaken that love for God within ourselves. And we become instruments of that love. George Harrison came to our guru when he was in the Beatles. And he asked, should I move into your temple? And Shyam Sundar was his best friend. And Prabhupada said, no, don't shave your head. Don't move into the temple. Don't change your clothes. Be a Beatle. But try to give people a deep spiritual experience through your music. To raise their consciousness. And that's what he dedicated the rest of his life to. And he transformed millions of lives. But anyways, I was away and my parents were home, and finally after some years I came home, and that's a very interesting story because it was a culture shock for them. They're a little bit of an upper middle class Jewish family, quite conservative, and I was a hardcore sadhu from the Hindu tradition of bhakti. And I came in with my begging pot and my sadhu robes, and I had matted hair, and I sat on the floor of their house, and they didn't know what I was. And I didn't know what they were either, because I was living in caves and jungles, and now I'm in a nice house. They said, we're so glad you're home. And I was kind of a little out of touch with things. I didn't even put this in this book. But they said, do you like being home? I said, I like being with you, but your home is Maya. And they said, what is Maya? And I said, illusion. Anyways, finally in 1989 they came to India to visit me. And their whole lives changed when they met people like, actually, Rajesh Tawar. He came with me on this expedition. He could be the witness. But they met people like Rajiv and Sanjeev and such beautiful people. Their hearts completely changed. They felt these are the most beautiful people we've ever met in our lives. And they saw some of the work we were doing and they became so proud. So I remember one day there was a kirtan in our temple and I saw my mother. She was about 70 years old then. She was dancing in kirtan with Rajiv's wife's grandmother. I thought that was really a culture shock for me. And then I saw my father dancing with the brahmacharis, with the monks. That was really, and they were crying every night, my parents, and embracing me. We're so proud of you, we're so proud of you. We're so happy you hitchhiked to India. It was worth it. But we decided to take him to do some sightseeing. How many of you have been to Elephanta, the islands? You take a boat from the gateway of India near the Taj Mahal Hotel. Anyways, Rajesh, this was his idea. Do you remember?
Yes,
And first thing that happened is we go on this little ferry and we get there and we're walking. And their lives have been changed, they're transformed, they're happy, everything's been so positive. They've been meeting beautiful people, they've been eating wonderful prasad, they've been seeing incredible projects. And now they're going to see India beyond just the people. And we start walking. This is in 89. It was just a forest pathway, right? And the first thing that happened is mosquitoes attacked. And my mother was saying, there's mosquitoes. Do they have malaria? And I couldn't lie to her. I said, I don't think so. That means they might? I said, I don't think so, because Swamis have to tell the truth, even to their parents. So we're walking, and my mother has her purse. In her purse, all the valuables of my mother and my father were contained, because they didn't want to leave them just in the room they were staying. Their airline tickets. In those days, you needed tickets. Their passports, visas, all their credit cards, all their cash, and my mother's jewelry was in that purse. Because my mother was very, very, what's the word? Very thoughtful to every detail. She would never lose anything. Until this day. A very large, angry male monkey jumped right in front of her and looked at the purse. And this monkey was, I'm not going to go into details, he was a brown monkey with a pink face and green eyes, and he showed his teeth. Very large fangs coming from the top and bottom. And monkeys really know how to psychologically invoke fear in your heart. And he opened his mouth his gums showed and his teeth showed, and he screamed. Kind of like a monkey. So. But you're laughing. Nobody was laughing when he did it. My mother froze. He was looking right at her, and then he grabbed her purse. And he pulled it, and my mother pulled it, and he pulled it, and my mother pulled it, and he pulled it, and she was screaming, and the monkey was screeching. My mother was going, ah! And I went to get a stick. My father said, everything is in that purse. Everything of value is in that purse. And I think he shouldn't have said that because the monkey probably understood. The monkey pulled harder and my mother pulled harder, and then the monkey went and jumped right into my mother's face almost. He just jumped at her. And it was too much for her. She let go. And the monkey stole the purse and ran away, climbed a tree, went into a branch of a big peepal tree, and started opening the purse. Now my mother and father looked up at the monkey. It was a high branch. And then they looked at me. And I don't know where you were at that time. I may have gone to get some soft drink for them or something. I don't remember if you were there or not. I just remember them looking at me. And they both said, "You are the one that brought us here. What are you going to do about this? Everything of value is in that purse." And if you remember, because many of you have connections with India, in 1989 there was a lot of bureaucracy to get a new passport, to get a new visa, to get new airline tickets, to get credit cards canceled and reissued. What to speak of the loss of all the cash. Could have taken weeks and weeks of just standing in lines in these different offices all day. And they looked at me, "What are you going to do?" I closed my eyes and I prayed, because I didn't know what to do. I couldn't climb up that tree. And I just prayed, "Krishna, save me." And then I opened my eyes. And I happened to see, about half a block away, on this road, this dirt road, there was a fruit vendor with one of those little push carts with wheels, and he had a pile of fruit on it. So I ran over to him, and I'm a Swami. I put out my cloth and said, "Ek kela," one banana. That's what they, and he said he wanted 10 rupees for one banana, because I have light skin. Bananas were not 10 rupees each, but he was really overcharging me. And I just said, "Bakshish, bakshish, bakshish." And he said, 10 rupee, 10 rupee. And I said, "Bakshish, bakshish, Swami, I Swami, bakshish." He said, no, 10 rupee, 10 rupee. He got really angry. And I didn't have any money. My parents didn't have any money. The monkey had all the money. So sometimes when you're in a desperate situation, you have to act in ways that you don't ordinarily do. Sometimes poverty can bring the worst out, even in good people. So at that moment, I was in poverty. I took a banana and stole it. And he started screaming at me. He actually attacked me, and I ran away. And he was running after me, and I was running, and he was running. And then, by Krishna's grace, this is my faith, a different monkey attacked his fruit cart. So he turned around because, to try to get one banana from me, he was going to lose all his bananas to this monkey. So he went and chased, and I got away. And then I went up to that tree, and I saw the monkey, and I showed him the banana. Can I tell you what that monkey was doing when I approached him? I'll never forget. He was in the process of chewing and eating my mother's American Express credit card. And I showed him the banana. He he had it in his mouth, the express card, but he stopped chewing as he looked at the banana. And I threw it. And I'm not a good thrower, because I haven't really played with balls since I was a little boy, so I threw it, and it wasn't a good shot. But that worked in a favorable way, because the monkey actually had to jump to catch the banana. And in the process of jumping, the credit card fell out of his mouth, and the purse fell to the ground. And I put the credit card in the purse, and I closed it, and I very proudly presented it to my mother. And she said, she started to cry in happiness. She said, "That was really intelligent, what you just did. I'm so proud of you." And she embraced me, and then my father embraced me. He said, "Son, you outsmarted that monkey. That was brilliant how you did that." Because he's a businessman. He was a businessman all his life. So for the first time, I think, in my life, he was impressed by my business capabilities. And when I came home months later, oh, let me tell you one other thing. My mother took 20 rupees out of her purse and said, "Go pay the fruit vendor." I forgot all about him. That's why we need ladies in our life to remember these things, even swamis. So I went and gave him 20 rupees. The fruit vendor was so happy. My parents were so happy. And I looked up at the monkey eating the banana. He was so happy. Well, what do you call it? A win-win solution. Everyone was happy. And when I came home, my parents were so proud and so happy with everything they experienced. And the highlight was the monkey. And my brother is Jewish. He married a Catholic girl. And when they had their first child, they were wondering, should we get it baptized in the church or blessed in the synagogue? And my mother and father said, "Your brother is a priest. Have the child blessed and baptized in the Hare Krishna temple in Tucson, Arizona," which we did for his sister. And then they enjoyed that event so much that when Willie was born, he was also blessed in the temple. You don't remember because you were an infant, but it was very nice. And my mother said, "Give him a Krishna name." So we gave him the name Balaram, and his sister Saraswati, which is like their, I don't even know if you know that you were given that name. So back to our narration. Integrity. We have the foundation to actually live with character, despite the monkey attacks that come in various ways in our life. When we have a sacred higher principle that brings us fulfillment. You see, the mind is like a monkey. And that higher principle of inner fulfillment, of a connection with God, of living with compassion, of living with dignity, that's like the banana. And we can easily let go of our restless, immoral, hurtful ways if we replace it with something that's more meaningful, more fulfillment. And that's connecting with our own souls, with God, and living with integrity and character. It is said that within each and every one of us there's a good dog and a bad dog. The bad dog represents arrogance, hate, envy, greed, selfish lust. love. And each of those dogs are crying for our attention. And according to which one we feed most, those dogs become powerful and their voice becomes very strong. I think many of us have the experience of that bad dog barking. You don't have to raise your hand, but I think we have had that experience of that bad dog barking and trying to dictate what we speak and what we do in our life. And the good dog sometimes is like, which of those dogs is going to win? The one that we choose to feed. With every choice we make in our life, we are either feeding our good dog or our bad dog. Dharma. Dharma means to feed the good dog by making choices that are based on the foundation of integrity and character. And not giving in to that bad dog, even if we have so much to gain or so much to lose by doing so. And that is what makes a person great. Srila Prabhupada, he said the greatness of a person has to be estimated by how that person can tolerate provoking situations. And that's why spiritual practice and satsang, associating with spiritual people, is very important. Because it establishes that foundation. Or in reference to a tree, it deepens and broadens our roots. On Friday night we gave the example of the redwood forest. Just yesterday we went to one. This underground secret of that redwood forest. These trees grow for thousands of years old. They're the widest, highest trees on the planet. And over those thousands of years that they're growing, they pass through massive storms, devastating earthquakes, and they keep growing. Because the roots grow outward, underground, and reach out to each other. And all the different roots of each tree embrace, intertwine with the roots of other trees, and make a permanent bond. And in this way, every tree in the whole forest is connected with every other tree through the roots. And whatever storms or earthquakes come, they're there to hold each other up. This is the way our families should be. This is the way our friendships should be. This is the way our companies should be. This is the way our society, and this is how this is how the world will actually come out from all of the crises that it's going through. Is when we find a higher principle by which we connect to. The roots of the affection and care of our hearts. Beyond all our differences and all our selfish inclinations, we're there for each other. That's a quality fulfilling life. And the Bhagavad Purana tells if we water the root of a tree, every part of the tree receives that water. And God is the root of all existence. When we go through our yoga, through our spiritual practice, through our bhakti, we chant God's names for this person to make that connection, to water that root. And if we're actually developing that love for God, it's not just a matter of talk. There's so many, in today's age, with the Twitter and the Facebook and the TV and the entertainment industry and all the different ways that people are communicating, there's so much emphasis on what we speak, how we speak it, what we look like, what is our personality. But that's not going to make such a big difference in the world. What do we do? What is our character? What is our integrity? That's what's going to make a difference. To love God, it's not a cheap thing. It means to live with compassion, with forgiveness, with self-control, with love. That's the greatest need in politics. That's the greatest need in business. That's the greatest need in family. That's the greatest need, believe it or not, in religion. Because it's as absent in religion as it is in any other sphere of life. Seeking the essence. And we can all do that just by giving some time and building that foundation by which we earn with integrity and we spend with compassion as God's just trustees of God's treasures. When I was at the House of Lords, I spoke one thing that got the best ovation. I said, you can understand how rich you are by trying to find out how many things you have that money cannot buy. That's real wealth. To love, to be loved, and to be an instrument of that love. And to be dynamic, competitive, productive, with that motivation as the very core of our lives. Thank you very much. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj, we want to request you to please sit down and we'll have a few question answers. I have the mic with me. If any of you have any questions, if there's anything, we have a mic behind. We'd be happy to pass it around. If you have any questions for Maharaj about business, about spirituality, blending the two, we'd be happy to. Yes.
Well, since no one is asking, I just wanted to make a small comment.
Okay, there's a mic with me.
Swamiji, you will recognize my voice at least. I was the one who put you on the spot the other day with the other question. Not to ask a question today since no one's asking, I just wanted to make a comment. As you're speaking, the recurrent thought comes again and again, how does a person born in Chicago go to India and become a Swami? You may choose to answer the question or you may not. My own thought went back to a movie that I saw, Ratatouille, which is about a rat trying to become a cook. And throughout that movie, the theme is that anyone can cook. And there are critics who sort of are against the view and they say that everyone cannot cook. And towards the end of the movie, it says, that's the punchline, it says that anyone can cook does not mean anyone can cook. It means a great cook can come out of anywhere. And so in that sense, a great Swami can come out of anywhere. Maybe you can expound a little bit more on your personal history, if you choose to, on the journey from Chicago to India, at least the root of it, what compelled you to take that step.
came to Mumbai, in those days it was Bombay, I was told that there were more rats than people. So I felt right at home. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he gave us a jewel of a verse that gives so much hope to all of us. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Satya Kapunoi Sravanadi Sudhichiti Koriyayudoi. That this love of God, this compassion, this realization of my own eternal, indestructible self, it is within everyone. It simply has to be awakened. It's like a seed that just needs to be watered and protected. It doesn't matter if we're rich or poor. Some people are in the illusion that only poor people can become truly spiritual. It doesn't matter. We could be billionaires, or we can be living in a little village. We can be PhD professors or illiterate. We could be men or women from the East or from the West. We can be old or young. It's our nature. Najayate mariyate vakadachit, that the soul is eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. It's undying. And within that soul, mamayvam so jivaloke, we are all part of God. And God is all good. Krishna is all merciful and all loving, has many names. And we are a part of that God. We're full of light. And that light could illuminate the whole world. That is the potential. It's just a matter of the sincerity of reconnecting. That's what yoga or religion is meant to do. Reconnect us with our true nature, with God, and to be instruments of love. And Krishna wanted to really emphatically give everyone hope. That's why he spoke the Gita on a battlefield. Because Arjuna was the least likely person to become a saint. He was a soldier who was about to fight. And it was a really, really taxing battle, Kurukshetra. And he was a family man with so many children and wives and all of that. Why did Krishna speak the Gita to a yogi in the Himalayas who gave up everything and only had his little kopan? He spoke to Arjuna. And after Arjuna listened to the Gita, Krishna told him that I want you to win this war, and I want you and your brothers to live in the palaces of the kings of the entire world. This knowledge is for everyone, because it's simply meant to awaken who we really are. It's meant to give us an appreciation of the treasure we already have. And instead of desperately trying to fill an emptiness within us by getting more power and more prestige and more money and more this and more that and never really being satisfied, through our work, through our wealth, through our influence, through whatever we have, we're actually giving the treasure of the love of our hearts.